What I think that he lacks and his operation lacks is the drive to get anything done with the gusto that is needed.
I mean, Beth, pick your metaphor. The dam has burst, the horse has bolted, the genie's out of the bottle. I mean, something
used
that
all
cannot
of those
be put
today.
back in.
The Prime Minister's team have done an amazing job of making this somehow Wes Streeting spot.
To Electoral Dysfunction with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
Now, it's been a mega week in politics, a mega week for memes. I have to say how much joy it's brought me seeing all the edits online of me being tethered to my broadcasting spot with a microphone, which stopped me interviewing James Murray outside Downing Street. I spilt 2 coffees over the pavement and I became a comedy character in the thick of it. I didn't mean to, it wasn't intentional. Karen messaged the burner phone likening the mic to a cattle prod. We had a WhatsApp from Joseph saying I was serving high camp. I quite liked that one, actually. And then Lottie made a Beth Rigby mega mix of me in all political crises, like being a dick at Downing Street. So thank you all for that. Thank you.
Can I just say, I think it's a miracle that you've still got your voice and are able to speak to us today. Because,
I've decided,
there's so much news. There's like a surfeit of news.
I've decided that there has been so much news that it's time for me to set a timetable for my succession because I can't take any more. Honestly.
Are we going to have to put your name forward to the Chiltern Hundreds?
Yeah, you're going to have to put my name forward. I've got a list of loyalists wanting me to stay on, but I don't know if I can command any more energy in myself to carry on, to be honest.
Well, it's your duty to the sisterhood and the political journalist world that you absolutely do, I'm afraid, Beth. No way out.
But I say, talking about the sisterhood, and indeed all of our dysfunctioners that have been listening to us over the years, got a bit of a throwback because you've got an exclusive interview with Jess Phillips that we're going to listen to later in the show.
Yes.
But so much news has happened. We've got to actually tell you a bit about what's been going on the last couple of days. And by the time you listen to this, you know, it might have moved on again. But Beth, come on, lead us through. We're recording on Thursday evening. Lead us through what on earth has been going on, because it has been a frenzy of activity.
I can't really put into words how intense it has been over the past 48 hours. We had that cabinet meeting that we talked about on the extra podcast episode. We had the resignation of Jess Phillips and some other ministers. We then had the hiatus of the King's speech. But even as the King's speech was being read out by the King in the House of Lords, and this is setting out the government's agenda for the next session of Parliament, I was getting wind, as were other journalists, that Wes Streeting was preparing to resign. He'd been into number 10 on Wednesday morning. He was in there for all of 16 minutes. They were describing it on one hand as the showdown or talks. The PM's lot was saying he's just having a coffee. And then I was like, well, he's definitely had either a single espresso on the basis of that timing of that meeting, or maybe he had a very cold iced latte, because I think it was pretty frosty. Then we started reporting in the middle of the King's speech that he was going to resign. Last night, it was just fever pitch level of gossiping in Westminster about was going to resign, did he have the numbers, government figures and supporters of Starmer saying he didn't, Wes allies saying he did. Then someone messaged me and said, make sure you're awake at 6 a.m. I was like, why would I want to be awake at 6 a.m?
Well, because there was a big ginger bombshell dropped at 6 a.m,
there was a big
there?
Angela Rayner bombshell in which she did an interview with ITV. I will eventually get over that. I will get over that at some point. She did an interview with ITV and The Guardian saying that she had been cleared of wrongdoing with her HMRC tax investigation. So she sort of got that out in the morning news, paving the way potentially, I suppose, to run if duty called. We then all sat around waiting for Wes. I at one point went to the Commons, and there's a corridor behind the Speaker's chair. Harriet, you will know it very well. And it's the Speaker's corridor, and it's where all the ministers, the Cabinet have offices, and the Prime Minister has Wes's office, and word reached me that Keir Starmer was in his office. So I sort of wandered up the corridor, get sent back again, wandered up again. You're not really, you're allowed to walk up it, but you can't lurk. So I went there for a bit to hang around, see if I could find any cabinet. Then I got wind that something might be coming at 1 o'clock, legged it back to the office, and hey presto, Wes Streeting resigned. So we did that on television, a very long letter saying that there was no vision.
I mean, there was a great line in Wes's letter which says, where there should be vision, there is a vacuum. It was just like, oh, it was devastating. And then he kind of went through all of his sort of gripes with the PM, particularly every time something bad happens, somebody else has to fall on their sword. So basically saying you don't take responsibility.
So we did that, and then I interviewed Jess Phillips exclusively for the Electoral Dysfunction pod. That was her first interview since she resigned on Tuesday, and we had a very interesting discussion about Keir Starmer. She was quite upset in the interview, actually. She looked troubled. She just talked about how he didn't listen, the frustration she felt in trying to drive through change. She said it was only when there were crisis moments that she could really further the agenda of violence against women and girls. She said, I personally like him, he's a good man, but like it's not working, we have to change it. She talked a bit about Wes Streeting, she talked a bit about Andy Burnham, Angela Rayner, she talked about as well. And then I finished that interview, and then I got wind that I also needed to get back on telly for 5 p.m. because something else might be happening. And then at 5 p.m, Josh Simons, the MP for Makerfield, which is a place near Wigan in the northwest. I'm not very good at geography. My mother's actually from Wigan, so everyone forgive me on that. Just very tired. He announced that he was going to give up his seat in order to let Andy Burnham run for Parliament. It is just absolutely batshit nuts, to be honest.
It is all going off.
Yeah.
Harriet, you're one of the longest serving Labour people ever. What on earth is going on?
Well, it's just incredibly worrying, you know, having fought for 14 years to get into government, getting into government in July, less than 2 years ago, with a big majority. And here we are in a situation where I think all Labour people can agree on what the problem is, but there just doesn't seem to be any agreement on the solution. And some people think, don't risk the turmoil of a Labour leadership. The people have actually elected Keir Starmer, even though so many of them don't like him now. But that is our system. At least they know how he got to be Prime Minister, and they had a part in being able to choose him. Then there was some people, but it seems like quite a few ultimately in the Parliamentary Labour Party, who wanted Wes Streeting to replace Keir Starmer. And clearly Wes Streeting himself was one of those people who wanted himself to replace Keir Starmer.
You're such a master of the understatement, Harriet. I mean, he's been preening himself for this for months, practically years.
But that didn't materialise, and clearly he couldn't get enough support in the PLP to mount a challenge. And then there was people from the left of the party who were like, no, we can't have a leadership election now because we are missing the prince across the water, which is Andy Burnham. We can't settle the leadership question in an election without Andy Burnham's in it. Fast forward to where we are today, whereby Josh Simons, who's actually an ally of Keir Starmer and part of the Labour Together, Morgan McSweeney side of things, says he's going to stand down in his constituency of Makerfield for Andy Burnham. And the thing about that, Beth, is that Andy Burnham, you remember, was turned down to be Labour's candidate in Gorton and Denton. And the result was the Greens won. But actually there was a hope in Labour that we could actually win that. And therefore it was, this is terrible, the Greens won. But with Makerfield, we've since had the council elections, and in Makerfield, every single Labour councillor lost out to Reform. So Reform now would think this is a Reform seat, but the Labour people in Makerfield tell me that actually Andy Burnham would win. And therefore the NEC's choice is much more difficult now, because if they block Andy Burnham, then it might be handing the seat to Reform. But if they let Andy Burnham come in, he is clearly coming in to be a challenger to Keir Starmer. And he said that in his tweet. What he said was, This is why I now seek people's support to return to Parliament to bring the change we have brought to Greater Manchester to the whole of the UK and make politics work properly for people. So he's not saying I want to come down and be a great MP and be part of the team. He's saying I want to come down to be Prime Minister. So it's a real standoff.
Can I ask you two things following on from that, Harriet? And that was very comprehensive. The two things that strike me, and I asked Pat McFadden in the studio just now, who's the Work and Pensions Secretary and is trying to shore up Starmer. Number one, isn't it too far gone for Keir Starmer now that as much as he wants to carry on as Prime Minister and he doesn't want to have a challenge, he's got Wes Streeting resigned and waiting. Andy Burnham is demanding to come back and he's found a route to at least try to come back. If Andy Burnham wins that by-election, he surely is coming back to take on Keir Starmer. I just think that the events are piling up that mean that Keir Starmer is not going to be able to stop this. He's not going to be able to hold the line. What do you think? Because that's kind of how I feel, but I'd like to hear what you think and whether you think I'm right or not.
I genuinely don't think it's too far gone for Keir Starmer if he does what he says he's going to do, which is really turbocharge change and really gear up his act, because that is what most Labour MPs want him to do. They want him. They've always wanted him to succeed, but they're just losing faith that he will. But that's ultimately their preferred option. And as far as people in this country is concerned, they want the changes that he offered. It's not that they don't like his agenda that was put forward in the manifesto of 2024. It's just they think he hasn't delivered on it. If everybody was happy that their cost of living was going up, they wouldn't be complaining about Keir Starmer. It's because of their objective circumstances that makes them feel so cross with him.
Harriet, I don't think you just realised the point that you've made there, which is the point that lots of people who are resigning are making. When you said that people out there like his agenda, they just think he hasn't delivered on it. That's the whole point. They think the blockage is him. The public, you know, they may have liked the Labour Party manifesto, but you were out in the doors at that election. All of your colleagues have been out in the doors for the last 6-7 weeks, and they've been told by voter after voter after voter that they don't like the Prime Minister, they don't trust the Prime Minister, he talks big and he acts small, the change that he promised hasn't come. You know, it's not that, you know, it's not that they've all left the Labour Party, they think the Labour Party isn't delivering for them. And, you know, your Wes Streetings, your Jess Phillipses, your Josh Simons, everybody is saying that has done the resignation sort of trip or has said that it's time for the Prime Minister to set out his timetable. Every single one of them is saying that at best he's an essay crisis Prime Minister that only gets his butt into gear when he's facing a crisis. And at worst, actually, he's just not got the drive. He's not pushing things through. He's not doing it. He's not taking on vested interests. He avoids conflict. He's not, you know, bringing the country with him. He's got no vision. You know, so if somebody else comes in and enacts the Labour Party manifesto that you've just said the agenda isn't the problem, it's the fact it's not getting delivered. Isn't that the whole point? Isn't that what all of the people on the other side of this within the Labour Party are telling you?
But the legitimacy attaches to the manifesto. We're elected because we have promised X, Y, and Z. But the legitimacy is also attached to the person who is the leader. And you know, if people feel too
not
often
unless
these
you're in
days
St Pancras and Holborn, nobody voted for Keir Starmer apart from the people in his constituency. That's what parliamentary democracy is. You're first amongst equals.
I know that we have a parliamentary system and not a presidential system, but at least people can see how Keir Starmer got to be Prime Minister and knew what the part was that they had to play in it, which is that they voted for him.
Where I am coming back to, and I've listened to what you said really carefully, but this is beyond. I think it's beyond his control, and the reason I say that is I don't think that he can block Andy Burnham trying to fight that seat. I think if that happens, there will be a mutiny in the party and it will just trigger a crisis even bigger than they are in. I just don't think he can block Burnham. I'm not saying Burnham will win the seat. I'm just saying I don't think he can block him. I don't think the NEC, the National Executive Committee, the governing party, I don't think they can stop Burnham trying to come back to Parliament now. Do you, Harry? I don't think he's got the capital.
Well, I think the stakes are higher because if the seat was then lost to Reform, because the NEC on Keir Starmer's instructions had blocked Burnham from standing when Burnham could clearly have won the seat, then that makes it very problematic.
I think that was
but
a roundabout way of
MPs,
you saying that you think that he's going to have to be allowed to run, isn't it?
No, I said the stakes are higher because a lot of the MPs who are expressing their lack of confidence in Keir Starmer, they don't necessarily want Andy Burnham. They want a range of different candidates. That there is a consensus about the problem in the Parliamentary Labour Party, but there is not a consensus about who is the solution. Is the solution for Keir Starmer to change, or is the solution Andy Burnham or some other candidate? And that's why this has been such a fractious and difficult thing, because everybody in the Parliamentary Labour Party is desperately concerned about reform and desperately concerned about the standing of the government, but they do not agree what the solution is. But I do have to say that somebody said to me, who listens to the pod, an MP, the velocity rate in the corridors now is 0 miles an hour. Literally, nobody is moving. They're all just speaking to each other. And that is just so bad for government, because ministers need to be getting on with delivering. Nobody in the public wants to see everybody just having a constitutional and
the government is in absolute
frenzy.
crisis. It's absolute paralysis. But the thing is whatever Starmer would want to happen, whatever those cabinet ministers saying that everyone should hold the line, the political reality of this now is you've got Wes Streeting that's resigned and said, I'm saying what a lot of people are thinking. You cannot command the confidence of this parliamentary party or the trade unions back in Labour actually as well. You will not be the Prime Minister into this general election. We need a debate about succession. Wes says that, Wes Streeting says that, and 4 hours later Burnham says I'm coming back. And whether Starmer wants it or not, or whether you want it or not, Harriet, and I can tell you don't really, and I understand why, and lots of MPs don't. I just think this is the firing gun on the leadership race. It looks to me like it is going to happen one way or another, whether Starmer wants it or not. It just seems that to me is what will happen.
I mean, Beth, pick your metaphor. The dam has burst, the horse has bolted, the genie's out of the bottle. I mean, something that cannot be put back in.
Well, congratulations to
me.
The fuse is lit.
Oh, the fuse is lit. Yeah, give me some more. I've got more
all of that.
live broadcasting to do.
The tectonic plates are moving.
I've shifted. Yeah. I tell you what. See, your longevity is really telling here. I could only week out 3 of them there. You're going off for a whole other paragraph of them. But it genuinely is. I mean, there is a sense of all of these loyal cabinet ministers that are being put on the television to stand there and go, yeah, the Prime Minister is trying to get on with the job and that's what he's doing. I mean, it is a little bit Chemical Alley, like from the Iraq War, where you had like the spokesman of the Iraqi government standing in front of like a burning town with sort of British and US tanks going on behind him saying, there's nothing to see here, we've not been invaded, we're still in control, like all that sort of stuff. That's exactly what it feels like now. It's completely has gone beyond the point where it can be reined back in. There's no route for Andy Burnham to take the crown that doesn't run through Keir Starmer either enabling it or giving him permission, because it's not just that the NEC, which is the National Executive Committee, has to let him stand in the by-election. It's that a writ has to be moved in Parliament, and the Prime Minister and the Chief Whip, they make that decision, and that can be months. I myself stood in a by-election that lasted for 5 months. Michael Martin said he'd stand down in May. He actually left in June. The writ wasn't moved till October, and the election itself was in November. So there's all of that. Beth, is what she raised, this idea that, Andy Burnham has a harder road here than all of these armchair generals that are saying, oh, well, now he's running, he's got it in the bag, he's going to win, because there's a lot of twists and turns before you can even say that he's actually even probably the front runner yet.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And actually, it was interesting talking to Jess Phillips, because obviously she is a Wes Streeting backer. She makes no secret of that. But she also spoke in very favourable terms about Angela Rayner and Ed Miliband when we were talking about what possible challenges there might be to Starmer. But when it came to Andy Burnham, she was quite prickly, I thought. I think she was probably voicing what probably many people will see looking at it, which is it's quite indulgent to force a by-election, risk a by-election, as Harriet was saying, when you don't know you're going to win it. Then if you do win it, you trigger the Manchester mayoral race, which the party then has to do. But look, let's get into that, because I've just spoken exclusively to Jess Phillips. She was, remember, of this pod a while ago before she went into government. She has just resigned from government this week as the safeguarding minister. And let's listen to that interview now. It's the first time we've seen you since you resigned from government on Tuesday. You resigned as the safeguarding minister. And as I said, this is the first time you've publicly spoken. Why did you resign?
So, look, a number of reasons, really. I felt very strongly after the local elections, which, have left my city completely and utterly divided between reform and then a sort of rainbow coalition of left-wing, left-leaning, if you will, parties, and frankly in a mess. I felt the same way that everybody felt, the sort of like, I knew this was coming sort of thing, but when your face actually hits the pavement, it's quite a different emotion. And I also felt that all of my colleagues coming out and saying, as they did in that moment, lots and lots of younger colleagues, lots of backbenchers coming out and saying that the Prime Minister, wasn't capable of the bold change. And I just reflected on my time in government. And how I have been very, very annoyed at many points about only being made to feel grateful for incremental change, I suppose. And then the Prime Minister made a speech about how, he won't just stand for incremental change. And it just didn't ring true to me. Okay. From my experience of dealing with the Number 10 operation and him. And look, I think Keir Starmer's a good man, and I've enjoyed working with him. This is not in any way personal, but like my own experience is charmed with the country's experiences. And I often think if you think it and your constituents think it, you're on a hide into nothing, ignoring it. And so I also never waste a crisis. Somebody referred to me this week as Jess Never Waste a Crisis Phillips. I will never waste a crisis to push for an argument on violence against women and girls. And I saw an opportunity to do that in resigning as well. But I couldn't let my colleagues go over the hill and not give them some cover. It's genuinely how I felt. I felt like one of my colleagues, who I love very dearly, and she can speak for herself, so will remain nameless. She rang me up and she said, "Oh, well, what are you going to do then? Because I know you think this. I know you feel the same way as me. What are you going to do?" And, courage calls to courage everywhere, I suppose.
Suffragettes, that.
Indeed. Suffragists, I think, Beth.
Suffragists. You just said Starmer's a good man, but you also and you said that in your letter, but you also said he doesn't have the drive of the fight. You said have a row, push back, make arguments, bring people along. Standing up and being counted can't always be workshopped. Politics is as much about feelings as policy, especially at the moment. What do you think? He's just too robotic. He can't connect. He doesn't bring passion. What were you getting at there?
Look. I mean. His comms style is of little interest to me, actually. If you are decisive and you go out and make big arguments, it doesn't matter if you're, you're not like, we don't all have to, it's not Strictly Come Dancing, as somebody I think said yesterday. I think it was Kemi Badenoch, in fact. You don't have to be glitzy. You have to be decisive. You have to be certain. You have to be driving at something. And we live in very, very, very politically, tempestuous times. And I think you've got to have a row. And look, what I had seen in government was, be careful you don't upset these people. What about this lobby? What about this? And I'm just like, make an argument and people will follow.
You actually said in your resignation letter on this matter of policy, and I'll bring this up now, you said you explicitly criticised the Prime Minister for not blocking children being able to take naked images of themselves. You said because we dilly-dallied and worried about tech bosses. Was that the straw that broke the camel's back for you? What happened and what was the policy?
I mean, so look, the technology exists, and actually, it's already on lots of this is already on our phones. Nudity blockers that would stop children being once your phone is age verified, which Apple do now. For example, they age verify you. Would be able to stop children being able to take naked images. Now, if anyone in the country had seen what I have seen whilst doing my job, you wouldn't wait for a second. I have seen some of the most horrendous things. Children being live cammed, using sex aids on themselves. 91%, as I say in my letter, of the child abuse imagery that was found by the Internet Watch Foundation and reported to the police last year, 91%. So nearly all child sex abuse imagery was self-made by children on their own phones. I have absolutely no idea why it would take anyone a year to be convinced of the argument to do something about that. I have worked incredibly hard, and there is amazing people in the civil service and some pretty amazing people actually within Whitehall working on this to get this over the line. And we were like, oh, I was told it'd be announced in March. Then it was like, oh, it'll be in June or when we can get a grid slot. And then when he made a speech about how I won't accept incremental change, I just thought, my God, it's taken me a year to get somebody to the point of saying, we'll ask the tech companies nicely. And it just felt like the very definition of incremental change to me.
Do you think he just doesn't get it? When he says that, he doesn't really get it?
I don't think that Keir Starmer, I think he's with me on the substantive. That's of no question whatsoever. He wants to end child abuse. That is not in question at all. What I think that he lacks and his operation lacks is the drive to get anything done with the gusto that is needed in a time it's like we run an analog government in a digital world.
Yeah, and you think he was hemmed in by tech bosses? He was worried about tech bosses.
100%. Yeah, I don't know whether he was, but some of the people who were around him definitely were. Definitely were. Why on earth wouldn't you have used the opportunity on Monday, for example, to advance the policy on social media? Yeah. It's one of our great ills. That would have been a really bold thing to say.
Did you want him to come out on Monday and just say, I'll tell you what, it's a bold policy. I'm going to ban social media for under 16s, for example. That would
likely have kept me in the tent. I'll be honest.
Right, okay. Really?
That would likely have kept me in the tent because it would have been something actually different. I just wanted to hear more, but that would have kept me in the tent 100%.
You watched that speech, you're like, enough's enough. I cannot bear it anymore. This incremental change. He says we've got to do things differently, but it's all, as you put it to quote another suffragist, is that the word you used?
Suffragette, deeds not words. Deeds not words. Suffragist is courage calls to courage everywhere.
Okay, but the deeds not words. Other people have stayed in the tent, are staying in the tent. What do you say to those colleagues?
Look, what I said, people will make decisions on what they think is best for the country. Look, I've got enough respect for my colleagues to think that they're making those decisions on the basis of what they think is best and good faith. But for me, the situation is that I think that there's lots of people not saying how they feel out loud. I think that people are worried about the process and all of that. And I get all of that. But for me, I find it very, very difficult to the collective responsibility of not being able to say. I don't think I was ever expected not to say that I wanted social media banned, to be fair. I think that I
Yeah,
was
okay.
perfectly able to say that. I think I once said on Loose Women that we should switch the internet off. So, I was no stranger of...
I'm with you on that. Let's go
yeah,
back to the olden
apart
days.
apart from Vinted, I want a Vinted carve out. But yeah, look, I think people are all making their decisions on the basis of what they think is right. But like, for me, it was never going to be enough.
And Jess, did you speak to the PM before you put out that letter? And what did you say to him?
I didn't speak to the Prime Minister before I put out the letter. But and what I would say is that I'm not sure it would have made any difference at all, because I think it finds it quite hard to listen.
Okay.
Unless there's a crisis. Like, and
Okay.
the other thing I wrote in my letter, and I can see it in the number 10 operation today and yesterday, is that they fight back and they run a really good operation when there's a crisis. And I saw that over Mandelson. I only managed to, really pushing on violence against women and girls, always relied on there being a crisis that we had to get ourselves out of. And that,
Right.
I can't sit around and wait for a crisis, but I can see that their operation is quite slick at the moment because they're in a crisis and they're trying to protect him.
And talking about a crisis, he had another crisis today because Wes Streeting resigned as Health Secretary. What did you think of that? I mean, you are a friend of Wes. You're presumably backing him. What was your reaction to that happening?
Look, I think it was brave that Wes resigned today, and I know, as somebody who has resigned twice now. Tom Watson says it gets easier every time you do it, but it will have weighed on with a completely heavy heart. But if you think that you don't have faith in the Prime Minister and you've said it to his face, I think it's very, very hard to say, isn't it? And so, look, I think it's the brave. I think Wes has done the brave thing, and I think he's been a brilliant health secretary. And look, I think it was the brave thing to do.
So, some of your colleagues think it's really destabilising, and that Wes has tried to coordinate a string of resignations, including yours. What do you say to your colleagues that sort of would accuse Wes Streeting of plotting and you guys trying to force the issue? What would you say to that, Jess?
Look, what I would say is there's a couple of things I suppose I would say to that. Is that the idea that all of my colleagues aren't plotting is for the birds. I'm just like it's politics, guys. Like every camp is plotting. So should we just pretend? Should we just stop pretending? And the idea that I have written so many resignation letters since I have been in the job. The idea that I did it because Wes Streeting wanted me to do it is, I literally have a mug in the Home Office that my private office bought for me that said I didn't quit my job today, because I have found it quite challenging for quite some time. But look, it is destabilising. I just think it's absolutely crazy, the idea that the thing that is destabilising isn't... After the local election results that we just have, somehow the Prime Minister's team have done an amazing job of making this somehow Wes Streeting's fault. Take some responsibility. We're destabilised because of the situation that we found ourselves in, and an unpopular Prime Minister who people feel is only able to have incremental change like that. You can support Keir Starmer, and I think he's a nice man and all of that. But the idea that the destabilisation started with Wes Streeting, I think, or anyone else, or Angela Rayner, or Andy Burnham, that we would have absolutely no problems in the Labour Party if it weren't for them. It doesn't ring true.
Are you worried that Keir Starmer staying in post is going to hand the country to reform?
Of course, that is what worries me. As Wes, in fact, said in his letter, the sort of nationalism taking over the country, that doesn't, that's a worry to me, and I worry that at the moment that is the trajectory that we are on. And like I say, it's not personal about Keir Starmer. I have absolutely no problem in him. I am worried about the prospects of what is going to happen to our country. And look, everybody has different tastes in how they do it. I think there's a way through that with, having a row and passion, which is what I said in my letter.
And Jess, Wes Streeting's resigned, but in his letter he makes it clear that he's not going to trigger a leadership contest. He's not challenging the leadership. How long do you think, well, number one, does Wes Streeting, do you think, have the numbers, or do you think he doesn't and that's why he's not challenging now? And how long do you think it's going to rumble on for? Because we're in total limbo now, right?
Look, nobody has the numbers in politics until they have the numbers. I will tell you from bitter experience that a canvas does not always return the electoral result that you thought it was going to. I won't swear here, Beth, but my father always used to say, the trouble is when door knocking is people lie. He said it in a slightly more sweary way. But look, nobody has the numbers until the contest is called. It seems like it's going to rumble on, doesn't it? It seems like that's the outcome that is, but it's not on Wes Streeting. It's not on anyone else. It will rumble on. It's on the Prime Minister to make this better, then, isn't it?
Do you think the PM should set out this timetable now then? I mean, is that where or do you think it's inevitable that he's going to have to, whether he wants to or not?
Yeah, look, I think I don't really it's not for me to give advice to the Prime Minister necessarily. It's certainly not anymore. I'm not part of his government. I think he has to really, really ask himself, is he the person who will win the next general election and that can really, really deliver in the meantime exactly what this country needs? Because what we have been offering is clearly not being felt on the ground. And we have done some amazing things. I don't underestimate that, but all anyone can remember is the mistakes.
Jess, would you have liked Wes Streeting to have triggered the race? Would you have liked that to happen now?
I mean, it's very easy to say from the comfort of my home in Birmingham that I would like somebody to do something. I would much rather this was dealt with quicker, but I don't think that's Wes Streeting's responsibility. I think it's the Prime Minister's.
Right, okay. And just in terms of Wes Streeting, obviously, if a leadership race does start, you would presumably back Wes Streeting, right?
I mean, it would, depends on all the candidates, I suppose. It's funny because, of course. I mean, look, Wes is both a brilliant politician and he's one of my best friends. It would be remiss I'd just be lying if I said anything else. I've got a huge amount of respect for people like Angela Rayner. And you know what? Also, massive soft spot for Ed Miliband as well. So it's funny.
Andy Burnham, what do you think of Andy?
Well, Andy isn't a member of Parliament at the moment, is my view on that. And look, I think, Andy Burnham used to work with my mom, and so
Did he?
My late mother.
Didn't know that.
And so and he gets a bit like misty-eyed when he talks to me about her. And so look, I have a huge amount of fondness for Andy Burnham, but I would also but what I would also say is that just be really, really careful of looking like it entitled. it looked like, there's a sort of level of entitlement that I feel like I'll just have X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
seat. I don't know. I'm really rooted in the place where I represent, maybe, and so I always think that it doesn't look great playing a sort of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I mean, you think the King of the North playing a Game of Thrones. I see what you did there. Did you mean to?
I sort of didn't mean to, but maybe subconsciously.
I
he is Jon Snow, yeah.
But the point is, I mean, it was interesting because Harriet Harman said to us on the pod the other week she thought that Andy should be brought back. I think what you're saying is actually the Labour Party trying to set out a timetable to sort of allow someone to get a seat to come back. You don't think necessarily is the right thing to do.
Look. What I think, look, if Andy Burnham can make it back and can win the argument and can win people like me over, then I'm totally here for it. That's not like, that's not particularly in question. What I'd say is that, like, yeah, it just to be really, really careful that we don't that he doesn't, and maybe this is some advice to him, come across as a bit entitled. Like,
Right.
Like the competition's only legitimate if I'm part of it. It's just sort of like, oh, like. I really, really like David Attenborough. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Is
who
that
else
your... Now
that
that's
might
a
be
news
good to
line.
leave the Labour
Jess
Party?
Phillips endorses David Attenborough as the next Labour leader.
Would win by a landslide.
He actually would. I mean, he literally would win 90% of the country's votes straight off.
Do I think he should be blocked and all of that or whatever? Like, to be perfectly honest, it's sort of like I'm not really that interested in that particular argument. But I just think you just have to be careful not to look entitled.
One more thing, Jess. The PM's argument, and you know it, and his allies are this is leadership battle would plunge the UK into chaos. Now's not the time to put economic stability at risk. Are you worried about this leadership crisis, how it reflects on the Labour Party and the government, and that it's gifting something to your opponents? I mean, what would you, when you think about that, what do you think?
Well, then I think if it drags on for ages, then it potentially does, it does harm. And once again, I say this is in the gift of the Prime Minister, isn't it, to deal with it? So, like that, I don't know why that it's only his opponents who, and like I'm not his opponent. I just didn't want. I have said my opinion about Keir Starmer, but it's only other camps that they're saying that about. Also, this idea, and I have to say, I'm going to debunk this slightly. This idea that there will be loads of delay in being able to do policy if we have a leadership election. I've known policies about launching really important things delayed by the grid. So the idea that Westminster acts in lightning speed at normal times, I've got to say, does not ring true to me. So look, politics isn't easy. Sometimes you have to go through difficult things to get a better result. That's just the top and bottom of it for me. But look, like I will step. I am loyal to the government in the sense that, like, whatever gets decided, I will put my shoulder to the wheel. Like, I want things to be better for women and girls in our country, and better for my constituents, who I have to say don't feel that our government is necessarily better for them at the moment. And like, I will do that. Tom, Dick, or Harry at the top, but it doesn't matter about the personality of the person at the top. What matters is that we are decisively taking arguments out to the country and winning them.
And just finally then, Jess, whatever happens in the coming weeks, and I don't think any of us know what will happen, what you're clear about is that Keir Starmer can't really in the long term continue as PM, and he's either going to get forced out by the party or he could just, in your view, do what's right and sort of call it a day. That's kind of where you're at.
Well, look, yeah. I mean, that is fundamentally where I am at. I think that it's not been a success, and I don't think that's malice on anybody's part. But we have lurched from crisis to crisis, and they only ever sort of seem to pick up their game when there is a crisis going on, and that seems like That doesn't seem very tenable for very long. Until
Okay.
like the next crisis. I mean, we've still got them like loads of the Mandelson stuff to still like, be released and things. It's just like, what next?
Okay. All right. Well, Jess, look, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. We
No,
really
really.
appreciate it. Thank you.
No props.
So, look, we're back, and that was Jess Phillips there. She at times seemed quite upset, I thought, in that interview. I think it's probably been quite an emotional few days for her, as it has been, I think, for lots of Labour MPs. This is tumultuous times. And I think taking the decision to stand down from government, calling out your Prime Minister, these sorts of things, I think I've never had to do it. I imagine it's quite tough. I mean, Harriet, I imagine that you don't, given what you've said earlier, necessarily agree with Jess's interpretation of the Prime Minister's leadership. What did you make of when she said he lacks drive to get anything done? Did you think that was a bit unfair, or what's your experience?
Well, just first and foremost, I was just I felt it so grievously that Jess felt she had to resign. And you look at the statement that was made about her resignation from Women's Aid, she was seen to be, because she always had been, an absolute champion in the cause of tackling male violence against women and girls. And so she's such a loss to the government with her absolute drive and commitment. But you could hear what she was saying there. She just felt at the end of her tether and frustrated. And, the truth is, it is really hard to make change in government. But she obviously just didn't feel that she had the impetus of the Prime Minister behind her. But she made a very specific proposal in her resignation letter, child pornography being made by children making nude images of themselves and being tricked into it, and that there is a way of dealing with that. And I hope that her legacy will be that Keir Starmer will read that letter and jump on it and actually say, well, I'm disappointed to lose her, but she was completely right on that and we're going to do it.
I mean, Ruth,
I think what was really interesting about that is because she was so specific about that point, about these 91% of images and how, look, if you can stop 91% of images of children being exploited over the internet, why wouldn't you do it? Why do you have to go off and, spend a year talking about it? I think what really struck me was the fact that, given the crisis that the Prime Minister's in, she could have exerted enormous influence if she'd spoken to Number 10 and said, I'm going to resign unless you announce. And she could have got that concession from them and got it down in black and white. But she's obviously completely lost faith with the idea that they can do anything because of that paralysis that we talked about, the idea that the Prime Minister would even be in post to be able to do something.
I don't want to say the Queen is dead, long live the Queen, and she is a grievous loss, Jess, but actually I think he's done a very smart appointment putting Natalie Fleet in.
Something that struck me in the interview, when we talked about the PM's speech on Monday, and we talked about sort of how he talked about needing to be change and have an urgency, the thing that was interesting about what Jess was talking about was her frustration listening to that speech. And she's like, I know some things that you could announce. And she talked about the under 16 media ban, like you could have just said that's what you want to do, or and you could feel her frustration, and that example that she put in her letter about the underage nudes, kids. You can put software in to prevent underage children taking photos of nudes, and she said, people around the PM were always worried about the tech giants. And I felt in the interview the frustration, and also what struck me when she was talking, coming back to what you said, Ruth, was it was like that moment, that make or break speech on Monday, if he'd just done some more properly bold announcements and taken some bold decisions, maybe he could have got some of his MPs to believe. Because what someone said to me earlier was that he'd been having people into his study, ministers, and he's saying, please don't resign, please back me, it'll bring chaos. But that someone said to me, all they were thinking about was managing the crisis. He wasn't sort of inspiring them about his leadership. And that's kind of what she was getting at, don't you think, Ruth?
Yeah, and he wasn't even asking them, and what is it that if there's a sense within the parliamentary party that I've not responded to, that we need to go faster and be bolder in certain areas, which areas that you want to talk about? What is it that you want this government to do? But again, part of the problem with that speech, and I think Jess did slightly sort of nail it when she put in her resignation letter, was like your team around you bigged up that this was going to be yet another big reset speech. It was going to be truly radical, just like you said that the King's speech was going to be radical. And there was nothing in there that we hadn't heard before. Where was the big idea? Where, she wasn't even asking necessarily for the world to be changed. She was just like, can you just pick a fight with someone? Because you want to make the argument for what we should be doing and where the country should be. And where should Britain be in 5 or 10 years? Just tell me something.
Yeah,
do you know?
And then on Streeting, I said, isn't this just bringing instability, like the resignations and the drama, and it's just making things worse? And she sort of made the point, look, the instability didn't start with Wes Streeting. The instability started with some of the mistakes the government made, a terrible set of election results, and now kind of people like Jess or Wes are getting smashed up for, reacting when actually it's the fact it goes back to the Prime Minister. And I think what I picked up was that thing where
come
she's
on,
like,
though. She knows, she's a proper pro.
Yeah, but
if she knows that if you shake the tree, if you come for the king, you have to kill the king.
Yeah, but it's also the kind of the taking responsibility. I mean, what did you think of that, Harriet? That she...
Well, I said, and we were discussing this on the pod that we recorded on Tuesday, that the problem has not been caused by the instability. The instability is a result of the problem of people feeling that they are struggling in their lives and feeling that they can't see a vision of hope from the future from the Prime Minister. And that is what the Prime Minister has got to fix. And that's what has caused the instability.
Harriet, can we just step back for a sec? Because I feel like I have been in this maelstrom, this whirlwind of news. I don't know where I'm coming. I don't know if I'm coming or going. I'm kind of working, I'm going to bed and I'm coming back, and it's just like, it's a rolling crisis. It's sort of, it's like nothing else. It's quite hard to describe what it's like when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the kind of middle of this like raging storm. But if you take just a step back and you look at this, Harriet, can you believe that this is even happening? You are less than 2 years in to a Labour government that won a massive majority, nearly as big as the Blair majorities of the new Labour years, when the 97 landslide. I mean, can you actually believe it's happening, Harriet, for your party?
I mean, certainly it is, it's horrific. And clearly it's been acknowledged that some of the problem that we're in now is down to Keir not having delivered fast enough and not given a vision. But it's worth remembering that he has inherited a situation that I can't think that any other Prime Minister has inherited before. Not just very difficult economic circumstances, but also global problems, which are absolutely stuffing our economy. And also this problem that I've got, this problem that I keep highlighting, is he's got an unvanquished opposition. Always in the past, when a new Prime Minister has taken over, nobody wants to hear from the opposition. They're vanquished. They've been chucked out. Why should anybody listen to them? They're not a viable alternative government. They were just in government and they've been got rid of. And that is who the new Prime Minister faces. And that gives them a period of grace of about a year or so where they can go ahead and make lots of make lots of mistakes, but they haven't got a viable opposition. Keir Starmer, from the moment he set foot in Downing Street, he faced the unvanquished opposition, which was reform. If he only had to face Kemi Badenoch, he would be looking marvellously prime ministerial. But
I don't know. She pretty much filleted him this week.
No, she is improving, but actually, this is nearly 2 years in. But right from the moment, I'm saying, Ruth, that he got in, he's faced this surging phenomenon of Farage, and that's made it very difficult. He hasn't had any space in which to get his feet under the desk in a way that, in 97, the new Blair government, which I was part of, loads of mistakes were made, but there was no viable alternative. So people just got on with it.
Ruth, because when Harriet just said that, I sort of think about what we were talking about maybe at the beginning of the year a few months ago, where you thought Kemi Badenoch would be a goner, but I don't think that I don't think that any of us predicted that Starmer would face a leadership challenge potential. I mean, what do you think?
No, although we were quite early on when I said that he wouldn't. I think I said the earliest of the three of us that he'd be gone by his conference, but that was more recently than the turn of the year. I take Harriet's point about there being a third force here, and that third force is Farage. But I only take it up to a point, because he had every advantage when he first became Prime Minister, and the Labour Party had every advantage. They had an enormous majority. They had broken the Conservative Party in terms of it was a rump of what it had previously been. We'd also just come out of an election where we couldn't tell a story about our time in government because we'd changed our Prime Ministers so often and they'd all contradicted each other. So there was no coherent narrative about what a Conservative is. I think Keir Starmer's fundamental problem is he came in with this enormous majority, looking like the world had fallen in, talked Britain down, said everything was terrible, it was going to take him years to ever fix anything in Britain. And actually, people didn't want to hear it. They wanted hope, and he didn't deliver it, and he didn't deliver change either. And that's what's come and bit him in the backside.
Well, that's all we have time for. But we should say that we've had the podcast crossover of the century this week. Beth, you've had a mega fan in the form of Jordan North.
Again, I won't hear a bad word said about her. Beth Rigby. You got any answers to the questions, poor minister? She's constantly heckling.
That is an elected representative of the people, as opposed to a member of the royal family.
Are you going to resort in poor minister? Beth, with your bob. Calm down. I love her, by the way. She's my favourite political. I've got quite a few political correspondents that I like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give us your top three.
Okay. Easily, right. I'm going to say Beth Rigby.
Lovely.
Chris Mason.
Okay.
Joe Pike. But Beth Rigby, something about her.
Okay.
It's the bob. When Beth Rigby interviews Rachel Reeves, you can't tell the difference. Yeah, it's bob on bob. It's great.
Does Rachel Reeves have a bob?
Of course she has a bob.
I don't think she has a bob.
She does.
Apparently she does.
She does.
There you go.
Is that how I sound? Because I quite liked it.
Do you know, I slightly flatter myself that I do a better version of Beth Rigby shouting at cabinet ministers than Jordan North. But we've all got one. We can all do the impression. And I should tell our listeners actually that when we were at the leaving do of your former exec producer, Shona, hi Shona, she told me that your plan for later life when the two of you retire is you're going to open a pub. And what's your pub going to be called? Your cocktail bar?
Bob and Lips. Wasn't it
The Bob and Lips.
The Bob and Lips.
Lipstick. The Bob and Lipstick. The Bob and Lipstick.
Yeah, we're just going to have, the thing will just be a bob in a silhouette with red lips. It's called the Bob and Lips. We're going to open a pub.
Well,
And Rachel Reeves can come, Bridget Phillipson can come, Lucy Powell, I believed, had a bob. Who else had a bob? Jess Phillips has got a bob back. What other women have got a bob in the... Harriet Harman has a bob.
And we should also say that it's really nice to hear you're such a fan of Beth, Jordan. We are also fans of Beth in the studio. And thank you so much to the team at Audio Always. So that's Ben, Stu and Jack. They were letting us share that clip there. And you can watch Jordan and William in full on YouTube.
Thanks, Ben, Stu and Jack. I loved that. That's going to keep me going now for at least another week of political madness. Send us your questions and your comments. We love to get to you over the burner phone. It's 07934 200 444. Email us at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. We might be back for an emergency episode in the next 24 hours. Who knows? But otherwise, goodbye, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
goodbye.